Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining our webinar today on test automation, manual testing combined to succeed. I am Oleksii, QA automation engineer and QATestLab, and my partner in crime today is our partner from Test IT, Artem Kostriukov, marketing and business development manager.
Hi everyone, I'm excited to be here and have a chance to share useful tips that can possibly improve businesses of many people here.
Today with Artem, we will discuss what projects require test automations, what benefits test automation can bring to your project, and how can it optimize your business. What test automation tools to use in 2020, when test automation cannot substitute manual testing, and why to combine test automation and manual testing. But first, let's check our internet connection. Leave a plus in the question section if you see and hear us well. You know, when you're part of QA team, you know how faulty software could be. Okay.
I'm gonna leave a plus first.
Okay. I see that everything looks pretty good. Also, please, during our webinar, write any questions you might have in the section questions, and we will answer them at the end of our webinar. The recording of the webinar will be sent to all the registrants and attendees within the next couple of days. Okay, let's move to our topic, and our first part to discuss is how can test automation optimize your business, what benefits will it bring to you, and what automation tools to use in 2020. Artem, could you please start?
Yeah, thanks, Oleksii. Well, first of all, let's look at the big picture. The World Quality Report in 2019 shows that end user satisfaction and the quality of products are the top priorities for CIOs, CTOs, and heads of quality assurance departments in most companies that took part in this major report held by Capgemini. The idea was that smaller parts, like doing specific operations, optimizing DevOps, bringing more features to the market, are generally less prioritized by the companies than end user satisfaction and overall quality. But how to achieve this end user satisfaction was actually a big question, also analyzed in the report. The idea was that only the combination of features, user experience, and customer support actually provide this end user satisfaction. So let's look at these factors first. The features come mostly from the feedback from the real users and from the analysis, like user stories that architects or business analysts or system analysts provide. And these user stories have to go through some sort of review. Most companies just look at how it goes. For example, for many clients, quality assurance doesn't always test the requirements. I mean, sometimes they claim they do, but people who are in charge of testing do not always have the capacity to actually do requirement testing. So most of the time they just check if the requirement can actually be covered by a test case, and that's it. That's basically it. They don't use various techniques of test design to check everything about user stories. But more and more companies look at shift left movement and say, hey, we want to jump on the bandwagon, and then QA becomes a part of product development at the beginning of the process, even before coding starts. So QA needs to be integrated into requirement generation, requirement management, and feature generation. For example, if your feature is in the user story, you decompose it into tasks and then assign them for developers. Developers often work in separate feature branches, like in a version software management like GitHub. And there is a tradition in companies like ours to have the testing process happen after each short build, but most companies do it before the major release when all the feature branches are merged. It's also good practice to have unit testing after each build, which generally is the responsibility of software developers, but it's only the ideal world. Of course, it would be nice if all the software actually had unit tests, but it doesn't always happen. System integration, end-to-end testing is usually the responsibility of the QA department, as well as the UI testing, which can be automated to some point, but most companies prefer to use manual testing in this case. user experience still needs to be checked by humans, at least at first. So the thing is, test automation can speed up testing processes on many levels, but it's hard to think of all the levels of development being covered by automated tests. First of all, if you look at the pyramid of testing, unit testing helps a lot. It's just a good practice of coding, which allows the ability or a feature on the very basic level to be tested, but there are also opportunities to automate integration testing and end-to-end testing using tools like Selenium for web or desktop, or Appium for mobile apps. They generally allow you to cut time to market. And time to market is, of course, a very important metric for the company. But it's always a balance, a trade-off between quality and velocity that the company has to look for. This is the most important thing here. Using optimized processes and right tools, the company has higher chances to reach the balance between the quality of the product and the velocity of development, which eventually becomes their competitive advantage on the market. So here's my answer to the question of how test automation can optimize the business. You think of the right tools, and then you develop the right processes. Speaking of the right tools, there's going to be a huge report by QATestLab and Test IT coming out soon, where we're going to be looking at 25 automation tools that can be used to optimize your testing. So when do you need test automation, and what kind of projects require it? The thing is, you need to think about test automation at the beginning of the project, when you are basically projecting this in the future. You need to think about the situation when you will have one and the same functionality from one release to the other, which will not change much. For example, when you're in e-commerce, the structure of your website, product pages, customers card, the comment sections, related sections, so on, they basically don't change much from release to release, and it's not so expensive to update the automation scripts of tests. In this case, it's really important to invest in test automation from the get-go. That's why a lot of our customers are looking for test management software, and one of their major demands is integrated automated tests on the most native level, like the easiest way. On the other hand, there are also projects that can be hardly automated. In many cases, when you're speaking, for example, about mobile game development, there are a lot of changes from release to release. For example, content changes, UI changes, then companies often add a lot of seasonal, monthly, weekly events, and all this content needs to be checked manually because it's just very difficult to automate. For example, you can't automate how it looks on many screens. The only thing you can make, so to say, semi-automatic when you have software for managing numerous configurations, the device farms, and a little bit of machine learning to track the UI changes, but most of it, it's still better on manual. You can't automate a lot of changes in mobile game development because in many cases, it changes too often to make it cost effective. So only basic things on the back end that don't change much can be automated there. In mobile game development, there is also a lot of localization testing, UI testing, play testing, and a lot of it happens manually. So what could be the benefits of test automation? Well, basically, there's a lot of them. Well, let's just focus on the three most important ones for a business. First of all, test automation happens to save time. And the most important thing here is that you need to understand when and where exactly it can save you time. At first, a lot of people, when they start thinking about automation, they're like, okay, why do I need to invest more time of my developers or my automation developers? Why do I need to use their time right now? Because it actually may be more cost effective at this point to use manual testing. But in the future, you just need to look ahead how much time eventually you're going to spend each release on testing of a particular part of your product. If your functionality does not change much in a specific field or area of a product, this part can be automated. Eventually, the benefits of the automation will hopefully cover the cost of the initial investment. And on the other hand, with the course of time, updating, maintaining autotests will take less time. Updating the test documentation and generally auto testing happens quicker than manual testing. So that's about time. About money. Of course, time and money are two connected things. So when you need to spend more time on regression testing, for example, it can be covered by auto tests. You generally don't have to spend so much time of your staff on this, and this means they can do something more productive. They can increase the coverage of manual tests by auto tests. They can spend more time on requirement testing. They can help software developers with bug fixing and so on. The idea is that the less time they spend on routine tasks, the more time they can actually spend on something productive. And in terms of money, that means that you invest into more productive and efficient work, which increases your effectiveness as a business instead of wasting your money and time, the time of your team, on something that could be done by a machine. The third part, eventually, of course, it will take time to cover most of your manual tests by auto tests, but eventually the time to market for a new release will be cut drastically. And some of our clients' regression testing, when it was done manually, it would take up to a week or even more. But when they covered most of their manual tests by auto tests, they were able to cut the regression time to 1.5 days. So basically 4 times. That means that in the competitive market, it brings you a huge advantage that you will be able to get the feedback from your customers. You can be faster than your competitors, and eventually, of course, this is a cumulative advantage. That means that it's not just 1 or 2 releases you can do faster. Your every release will be faster in the time frame over a year, for example. You will be able to move more flexibly and at higher pace if you spend more time on quality assurance with the same results. So, for example, you were able to do 10 to 12 releases each year before that, and when you're able to automate most of your testing, you'll be able to add like 2 or even 3 more releases to this schedule just on the time accumulated throughout the year. So this is like a snowball effect. So, Oleksii, from your point of view, from a technical aspect, what benefits can automation bring to the project?
First of all, as you said, it can offload some work from manual testers, and then they can spend more time testing what is more critical. Second, automated tests are usually faster, and once they are created, they can be executed as many times as needed, and they just don't get tired of testing same stuff. And last but not least, maybe not very technical, more like business-like, but even though initial cost of automation is higher, in the long run, it is cheaper to do all testing manually. And the faster you start implementing automation, the faster you will break even on your return on investment graph.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. By the way, I remind our audience that you can leave your questions and we will definitely answer, try to answer most of them at the end. So, Oleksii, what automation tools can you suggest to use in 2020?
Okay, if we talk about which test automation tools to use, the first thing that comes to mind is Selenium WebDriver. It is considered to be industry standard for user interface automation for web. And according to Test Automation Landscape report, it holds more than 50% of the market and offers insane flexibility. For example, it is possible to write test scripts in a lot of programming languages like Java, Python, C#, JavaScript, Ruby, maybe even PHP. And it's supported by all operating systems and has maybe widest coverage of the existing supported browsers. There are also a huge community around this tool, and you can easily find pre-made solutions and libraries that you need. The only downside to Selenium, in my opinion, is that to use it effectively, you need to have some decent skills in programming and spend some time upfront building test automation framework. Next chunk of test automation market is mobile apps. and the leader here is Appium. Appium is using WebDriver protocol, and writing test scripts with it is in general a very similar experience to Selenium, with the same advantages like a lot of supported programming languages and a big community. We should also not forget about API automation. I personally mostly used REST Assured, which is amazing library for Java language. It is very simple and powerful. You basically write Gherkin style code to interact with the APIs, and if you already know some Java, you can start with as little as a couple of hours of learning. And the next option for APIs is Postman. It is also offers possibility to automate and chain requests, and probably every QA engineer is familiar with it. There are also newer and fast-growing tools available for automation that use JavaScript language, like Puppeteer, Playwright, WebDriver IO, and Cypress. I personally don't use them since it is not my technology stack. But we have automation engineers in QATestLab that work with those tools, and I don't remember hearing anything bad from them. Also, you can check out the mentioned earlier report by QATestLab and SAT with a review of about 25 automation tools. Okay, let's move next to eternal question, manual testing or automation, and let's take a closer look. In my opinion, in which test cases we should use manual testing and in which cases we should use automation. In my opinion, manual testing is always should be first stage of testing. After a new product increment is done, QA engineer manually verifies that it works as expected, meet requirements, user needs, and expectations. After that, there are two possible options for further action. First one, we add these cases to our regression scope, and before each release, your testers will spend time verifying that part of product manually again and again, from sprint to sprint, doing the same tests. And second one, you can create automated test scripts for this part of product, and it will be tested faster and more often, and your QA engineers can spend free time testing some features that are more critical at this point. And the next question is, why test automation cannot substitute manual testing? Automation scripts are not very intelligent. They just do what you ask them to do. For example, if you write simple login test for like open page, enter login password, click button, expect to see something, it will do exactly those steps. And if your website throws some scary error pop-ups and maybe error to console, maybe fonts changed, automated scripts simply will not care until they can see those mentioned elements and interact with them. So, on the other hand, we have manual testers who will not just blindly follow steps of test cases, but also look to the browser console, analyze traffic, pay attention to accessibility, user experience, and stuff like this. So, it sounds like best idea to combine manual and automation. And while previous information might sound like manual testing is better, in the real world, there is not always a need to verify all those small things like everywhere in your app, every time you add something new to your product. You just need to carefully test new features and verify that nothing is broken on the stable part of your software. So basically, you need manual testing for initial verification, validation of new recently changed features, and you need automation for testing regression scope. Even if your product cannot be automated on the UI side, or you don't want to fully rely on the automation, you can still automate API and add additional level of safety between unit and UI tests. Or you can even automate test data creation and test results reporting and analysis steps. It is actually exactly what I did on one of my projects while I was in process of learning automation and wanted to apply my knowledge somewhere. So I created Selenium scripts for admin panel that created a lot of test data, and with a 3-minute script, I had everything I need to start regression and provide results a bit fast. Artem, what do you think about combining manual and automation?
Well, as I said, not everything can be automated. It really depends on what you develop, on your business model, on your product, what your customers expect from you. So, for example, if they expect a higher standard of quality, of course, you need to invest more in quality assurance. And some things are better done by people than by auto tests. Another thing, as I noticed, in some parts of the product, it's more cost effective actually to use manual tests for specific testing like smoke testing or sanity testing when it's too expensive to have auto test developer to write an auto test for a feature that can be tested in an hour or less. But progression testing then can be automated. So if the feature is not going to be tested in the next release or it will be just part of a regression test, it's easier to do that manually. It's also a part of A/B testing, for example. It's, again, easier to do it manually. In many cases, the transition from manual to automation happens gradually. They start with manual testing, then after a couple of years, there comes a person and says, wow, you still don't have auto tests. Let's start just developing them. But the company have already developed thousands of test cases and checklists and whatnot. And all of this legacy needs to be covered by automated tests, and it doesn't happen overnight. So at some point, it's a good idea to have both manual and automated tests in one place, in one nice system, like a test management system, like TestIT, the one that we are developing, where you can store your test documentation for manual testing and run auto tests. So manual testers, QA engineers, and software developers in test can find it there, but at the same time, your auto tests also are in the system and you can get reports from them. You can run tests in one place and then get information about like why they fail, what are the reasons, create bugs from one system, and you get a report that covers the condition of your product as a whole, or a build, or a release candidate, which unites all sources of your information in one interface. So as I said, the transition from manual testing to automation may be a long time. It may take, depending on the resources your company has, like months or even years. Quite often you have like 20 manual testers and just one person that write auto tests. But having manual and automated tests in one interface really helps the whole team, all of the people who are responsible for the quality, for test management, manual testing, test automation, and even analysts like that work with the requirements. They have to be on the same page. So that's the whole idea of integrated test management.
Thank you, Artem. I think it's time to check our attendees' questions. And first question that I see is, actually, I see a lot of questions about Cypress. As I said, it is not my technology stack, but as far as I know, Cypress only supports Chrome browser. So if you need to support more than Chrome browser, probably it's not a good choice for you. But according to research that I've done, at this moment, Cypress has more stars on GitHub than Selenium repository. So probably it's a good tool, why people like it. Okay, the next question.
So I think I'll read it. Should QA automation engineer be good at manual testing as well? Well, in my opinion, most automation engineers come from either the developers that wanted to go into QA or from manual testers that wanted to develop professionally and they started to code. So in both cases, when you transition from software development into QA, it's a good idea to know the theory, know test design, and be skilled at testing. And for that matter, it's a good idea to do some manual testing as well. So even if you have developed software beforehand, you should probably work as a manual tester for at least a little bit. And on the other hand, when people transfer from manual testers to automation testers, they usually have enough experience to be generally good at it. So I would say in both cases, it's a good thing to be good at manual testing anyway. What do you think, Oleksii?
As someone who transitioned from manual testing to automation, I can only agree with you. Okay, next question. What tool would you advise as tool for desktop app automation? I personally don't have experience automating desktop applications, but as far as I know, Appium should support it. Also, there are tools like RunnerX and Catalan. They are not free, but I think they also allow to automate desktop applications. Okay, I think it's enough. Next question, what is more common, mobile automation or web application automation? I would want to say web automation, but most of my recent projects were for mobile, so maybe it's 50-50. At least according to some researches, 41% of traffic as of 2018 was from mobile. So I think we're approaching to a point where mobile will be more popular.
Mm-hmm. Well, from my point of view, most of our customers use automation still for web applications, but it really depends on what project we're looking at. For example, a lot of e-commerce tries to automate both web and mobile, depending on the platform. Banks as well. Actually, fintech is very thriving. But when we think about like more web-based services, of course, they don't really invest much in the mobile experience. So sometimes they don't even have mobile applications, so that they don't automate them. And for many smaller, for example, when the mobile application is not the main touch point with the end customers, they don't invest much into automation because it's more cost effective for them to use manual testers in that case. For example, when the features in the mobile app are not as numerous as in the web version.
Okay, next question is, what is the best tool to automate in C#? I talked about Selenium WebDriver from Java perspective, but it has as good support for C# as for Java, and Appium as well has support of C#. So we can use pretty much these tools as well without any problems. Okay, what do you think about BDB? I'm not sure what is BDB, but I'm familiar with BDD, which behavior-driven development. And in my experience, it sounds good on a paper when it's like presented like anyone in the team can write after tests. In the reality, it still involves a lot of coding and fine-tuning, and well, not as good as it presented by in general.
There is also an interesting question. Is it okay to be both automation and manual QA? In our company, we test it manually, and after that, we write tests for it. Is this a good practice? Well, I wouldn't say this is the best practice, but this is what often happens in smaller companies. And the idea is that when you don't have enough manpower, but you still need to do automation when you have an automation project in your company, the same people have to perform the role of both manual QA engineers, and then they switch to automation testers, engineers. And this is rather a necessity than the best practice. Usually it's just a transitional period. But I think it's perfectly okay because still it's a necessary point of time when you have to transit from one function to another. And if you cannot just outright hire several people that will write automation scripts for you, if you want to learn how to do that, it's perfectly fine.
Okay. Next question is, please comment on Jenkins and Git and what automation tools are there in Jenkins. I mean, Jenkins and Git are usually used together and frequently. And for example, on my current project, we use Jenkins as CI tool for our test runs. And I'm pretty much satisfied with it. It allows you to execute anything actually you need. It's very similar that you just have access to the machine as a gauge agent, and you can run Maven commands, you can run Gradle commands, and it's pretty much universal. And I think Jenkins is most popular tool for CI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even in TestIT, in our test management system, we mostly integrate with Jenkins as the CI/CD system, which allows us to use webhooks to control the test runs. So you can launch autotests from the test management system just with one click when you have the integration with Jenkins.
Okay. Are you seeing a decline on manual tester positions and more on automation? Will it be the future of testing? I personally don't see decline in manual tester positions. I think they even growing. Same as automation positions, because more companies now want to have good quality process. And as for future, who knows, maybe machine learning will replace us all in 10 years, but for now, we're pretty much safe with what we have.
Mm-hmm. That's actually a very good topic for a debate, or maybe even for a separate webinar. From my point of view, as Oleksii said, really the positions for manual testers are growing as well as the automation engineers, because the market itself is growing and more companies are investing into quality. Because like 10 years ago, you probably could go to market with a half-baked product, but now even when you have an MVP, it has really to be like very high quality, because people don't buy the stuff that doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. What tool to best use with WordPress development? I think WordPress can be any tool that are designed for web UI automation can be used with WordPress. Okay, and next question, what is robot framework? I personally don't have experience with robot framework, sorry.
Mm-hmm. So I think we skipped one question also. How many users answered that survey about the tools they used, and where did we get the statistics, from Europe or all around the world? That was the report on test automation landscape, right, Oleksii?
Yeah.
And I think it was global.
Yeah, it was global and conducted by Catalan platform. So it's maybe a bit biased towards Catalan popularity, but in general, it's good representation.
Yeah, remember Catalan was being second on the list.
What do you think about behavior-driven testing? I think we already answered it. I said that it's good on paper, but in practice, it still involves a lot of coding, and it's just not really easy for people without programming skills to write tests with it.
Mm-hmm. A question, do you often use Python for test automation? Well, we in our company had a survey of our customers and just the community of several hundred people, and actually the top 3 languages were like this. Java was the first, JavaScript was the second, Python was the third, and then there was C#. So I wonder if you have a different experience.
We have automation engineers that work with Python, and they have a lot of requests. And to be fair, I'm a little bit jealous towards them, because this project usually involve a lot of hardware stuff. They working with real devices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Python is maybe second or third choice in popularity for test automation.
Okay,
What
and now
yeah.
Go ahead.
What is the best framework in automation testing? I think Selenium WebDriver, because I mostly use it.
It might
Maybe.
not be the best, but it's the most widespread. Let's call
Yeah,
it like that.
you basically can find any solution that you might need in your day-to-day work.
Yeah, but there are also a lot of I wouldn't call it versions, but rather updates or frameworks or libraries that upgrade Selenium, then would be Selenite, Selenoid, Selenite. I think I've heard like at least a dozen of them that work on Selen somehow.
Yeah, actually, I worked with Selenite, and it's an amazing tool. It's like 80% ready framework. You just need to make structure, configure browsers, and you're pretty much good to go with implemented a lot of stuff like weights, conditions, and all you need. Okay, next question is, where is C++ in automation testing? And to be fair, I never heard about automation testing with C++. Maybe in game development. Not sure.
Yeah, I would say that it's not that popular. As I said, most would automate using Java or Python or JS.
Okay, probably the last question. What is your opinion about page object model? I use page object model, and it's probably most widely used pattern for test automation.
So,
Okay.
and there was also a question if our presentation will be available to see again later. Well, everybody who took part in this webinar will get the recording of the video. You would be able to have a look at it again, just run through it, watch us again, answer the questions and so on. And we will also send you the link to the report that we mentioned about top 25 tools for test automation in 2020 that was produced by QATestLab in conjunction with Test IT. And I think it's a great report. It's over 40 pages of value.
Okay. Thank you again, Artem, for sharing your thoughts and useful hints. It was very interesting to participate in this conversation with you, and thank you everyone who listened and joined us today.
Thank you, Oleksii. Thank everybody that you found time to be with us today. Hope that today's webinar will open up new opportunities for all our audience.
Yeah, that's right. Let me remind you that webinar was conducted by QATestLab company and Test IT company. If you want to collaborate with us, do not hesitate to visit our websites, and also don't forget that recording will be sent to you by email. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.